Okay, the next thing we're going to look at, let me just click the old share screen here again. We're going to bring up this same screen. And this is the screen again, like I said, that you're going to come across when you first get ready to log on. And the logons that we use are our email addresses, or the email address that you used or was assigned to you as a law clerk, for instance. You'll use your law clerk email address, and then there'll be a password that you were assigned, which you can then change. And all you have to do is click log in, and you're in. This is the drop-down menu here that gives you all of the different programs. Yeah, there's the case summaries that Marshall just went over. The next one we're going to go over is interest and penalties. So we're going to click on interest and penalties, and we're going to do a new case. Okay, so we just click on this. Now, what's this program good for? Well, it was originally designed as a child support arrearage calculator because it would do not only the statutory interest, but it would also calculate penalties that accrued under the statute. In February of 2020, we did away with the statute and implemented the new child support regulations that don't include penalties. However, there are still a number of people out there that have not paid all of their child support prior to February of 2020, and thus there are still penalties that need to be calculated and accounted for. So this program actually keeps track of that. It knows that if you have a child support payment that was due and owing prior to February of 2020, it applies those penalties to that up to that date, and after that date, no more are applied. So it's really good for that purpose.
If I can break in just a little bit,
Sure.
the reason for the historical development of the program, this is the oldest of the 4 programs, although it's been greatly updated and modernized over time, is that the Nevada legislature many years ago decided that we would have floating interest rates. Our interest rates change every 6 months, or can. And because of that, it became extremely difficult to hand calculate an arrearage on anything where more than 6 months went by, because how much interest accrued changed every 6 months, and it was wildly gyrating there for a while. So all of that is built into the program. You don't have to keep track of it. You don't have to worry about it. It calculates all of the historical interest rates all the way back to 1955, no matter how long has gone by or how many changes have occurred or what payments were made on what arrears when. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, that's very relevant. And if you've been a law clerk long, or if you've been sitting on the bench for very long, you would notice that a lot of people don't even attempt to do the interest calculation. They just do a schedule of arrears on the principal because it's just too complicated to do. In fact, I think that's exactly what the form that is provided by the district attorney's office does. It just provides a list of what was due, and whether or not it was paid or how much was paid. This program will keep track of absolutely all of that and give you a schedule of arrears at the end, which we'll see. So we have to fill out the form first to get started. Since it's a new case, we're going to say that this is the plaintiff, and the case name we're just going to use Jones versus Jones, just like that. Our plaintiff is going to be, we're going to use Robert again, Robert Jones. And the defendant is going to be June Jones. And for a case number, real simple, D-21-12345-D. We'll do that. And we'll pick on department. Well, we've got a law clerk from Department I. We'll use Department I. So we'll throw that in there. Now you have to put a description in this box. It won't appear in your schedule of arrears, but it helps you when you're doing a search for any of these, because this case will reside on your computer in perpetuity. So you're going to be able to, not on your computer, excuse me, in the program in perpetuity. So if somebody comes back 6 months later and needs to do an updated schedule of arrears, they can open up this exact same program, just make the changes that have occurred over the past 6 months, and you can redo it. So in this case, we're going to do a child support arrearage. Oh, I can't spell you today, Marshall. And then we click submit. And that brings us, so the case is now created, and that's exactly what it is. But you can see We currently don't have any amounts due, and we don't have any recent payments. So we're going to start with, what was actually ordered by the court to be paid. So we're going to say new amount due on this list right over here. Okay. Now, if it was a one-time deal, for instance, a healthcare expense that the court considers to be a child care cost, we could click one-time transaction, put the amount in, put the date that it was due, click the little child support box right here, and then you're done. You just do save and view case. But in this particular case, we're going to actually do child support payments. And since child support was actually due, and it was always due at the same times, we click recurring. And we need to know how much is recurring on a regular basis. In this case, we're going to say that it's $455. You don't have to put the trailing zeros on here, the decimal point of the trailing zeros, unless you actually have 450.30 cents, something like that. But I do it just because it's clear. Notice I did not use the dollar sign. If you put the dollar sign in there, the program will tell you you've made a mistake and you have to go back and remove it. Okay. And then we have to select the interval. And child support, as a general rule, occurs monthly. But you'll see quite often that it's paid more often than that. Maybe it's paid twice a month, like on the 1st and the 15th. So you can select it. I've even seen it paid weekly when somebody is having their wages garnished and they're working weekly. So this gives you the opportunity to be able to select any of these. In this particular case, we're going to say that it's due twice a month. So we click that little radio button. We move down here, and you have two choices again. You can either do it on specific days, like the 1st and 3rd Sunday of every month. You don't see that very often in a child support calculation. So we're going to go with something that's a little bit more relevant. It's going to be due on the 1st and on the 15th of every month. This box here is the only box in this entire program that isn't really intuitive. It is possible for a court to say that child support is going to be payable quarterly, or it's going to be paid every other month. Again, you don't see that very often, but it's possible that that could happen. So what we put into this box, since we know that it's payable every single month, we put a number 1 in there. If it was paid every 2 months, you'd put 2 in there. If it was payable once a quarter, you'd put a 3 in there. But in this case, we know it's due every single month on the 1st and the 15th. And then we have to pick a start date. And in this case, we're going to say that this was due back on 2/15/2018 is our start date. Okay. Your next choice is whether or not you're going to go for a certain number of occurrences or whether you're going to go through a certain date. This one is really good if you have a very short time frame, like, there's only 3 or 4 months until the child emancipates. You could put in 6 occurrences and it would calculate it that way. But usually that's not the case. Usually it's going to be a much longer period of time. In this case, we're going to use the exact same date we used the other day, which was 5/18/2021. So it's going to calculate all the way through the 18th of May. Notice that when I typed it, I could type 5, then 1/8, but I put the entire year here. You have to put the whole year in. You don't necessarily have to, put a 0/5 and then a 1/8, but you do have to put the whole year in. And then I'm going to click this little box. Now this is important to click this box because it marks every one of the amounts due as a child support amount. And remember, anything that was due prior to February of 2020 is going to have penalties assessed against it if it isn't paid. So it's really important. If we don't check that block, it's going to treat this strictly as a judgment from the court, and no penalties will be assessed prior to February of 2020. So it's important to click that box. Okay, so we've done that. We've got this. Everything is all in here. Great. We don't have to put any description here. You can. It gives you more search terms to search for if you're looking for this particular case. So if you want to put something in here, you can, but you don't have to. So in this case, we can just, we don't have any other child support that we're going to put in, no other attorney's fees or anything else. So we're just going to say save and view case. And now we have a complete list And I'll just show you here. If we go up here to amounts due, it'll give us pages of the $450 that are due. And note that $450, when I plug that in, that $450 was actually due on the 1st and $450 due on the 15th. That wasn't a total monthly child support. Total monthly child support would be the two of them added together, obviously $900. Okay, so let's run back here, back to the case. And we want to put in, he made some payments. So let's put some payments in here. So we click new payment. And again, if by chance he's making all of his payments through a wage assignment or a garnishment, and the payments are coming in relatively close to the due dates, the 1st and the 15th, we could put in recurring and just click recurring, and we would tell it how they're coming in. But that doesn't usually happen. What usually happens is, if Robert is the one that owes the money, Robert is making the payments to June. Sometimes he makes them on the 1st and the 15th. Sometimes he makes them on the 5th and the 20th. You have to make sure that when you put in the payments, that you put in the payments exactly on the date that he made them, so that the program will calculate the interest and penalties correctly. If you don't use those exact dates, then you aren't going to have a perfectly accurate calculation. So in this case, let's say that Robert made his $450 payment, and he made his first payment on 3/1/2018. And then we click save and new, and he makes another payment. This time he only paid $300, and he made this payment on 4/1/2018. We'll do another one just for fun here. Save and new, another one-time transaction. This time he made a payment of $600, and he made that payment on 5/2/2018. Okay, and then he just stopped making payments. Obviously, every payment that he makes, you want to make sure you put in here. But once we do that, we can say save and view case. And now if I go over here and I look at the payments that were made, you can see all the payments and the dates that they actually were made right here. Okay. All right. So we go back to the case here again. Now we're to the point, if all of the money that is owed and all of the money that is paid has been entered into the program, we just come down here to this button, which is the reports button. And we click on that. There we go. Okay. And you're going to see, this is the reports page. And you see all these little boxes with check marks in them. They automatically are where they need to be for Nevada statutory interest and calculations. If by chance you click the wrong box or you unclick boxes and you can't remember what the right settings were, just click the default settings button and it brings them all back. Marshall, you had a little blurb that you talked about last time about why all these are here. I thought I'd let you say that again.
Short version is again historical. Whoop.
Yep, you muted again, Marshall. Sorry.
Let's try that again. Okay. Short version is that it's a little bit of history. The program was originally developed when a lot of the decisions about how interest should work hadn't come out yet. And so the program was built in such a way, the original program, and carried forward in such a way that the calculations could be altered if the Supreme Court directed that the methodology, or the legislature, that the methodology of interest calculation should change. We have left the defaults to comply with all of the case law relating to how interest is to be calculated. For example, there's an old case which specifically says do not use compound interest. So we don't check the compound interest block, and the program will never calculate interest on interest. But if for whatever reason you ever needed to, you have the ability to manipulate the program by telling it to do so. To prevent anybody doing this accidentally or allowing a court to accidentally look at calculations that are done incorrectly, which switches are on are recited at the bottom of the reports.
Okay, thanks, Marshall. Now you'll notice the start date. This is the date that we use as our start date for when the child support was actually due. And here is the end date. This was the date that we said that the child support calculation was to end. Now, that might be the date that a child emancipates. It could be a date of a hearing. The nice thing here is that if I have a hearing that's coming up, I can actually plug into here the date of the hearing, and that way the calculation is done right to the day of the hearing, so that any schedule of arrearage that I present to the court is going to be accurate up to that date. So we're good here. Again, this button here, Generate Audit Trail, this is one of those buttons that we suggest that you don't click and then hit the print button, because you will use up a lot of paper. It exists because at the time the program was originally developed, which was, what was it, 1998, Marshall? Was that the, I think that was.
Oh, no, it was much earlier than that.
Oh.
I think the original program was around 1989, 1991.
Okay, before my time. But there were some judges that didn't want to accept the schedule of arrearages that didn't show every single calculation that was done to achieve the arrearage that said. This will prove the calculations that were done all the way through the entire program. We haven't had to do that in a long time.
Yeah, and actually, for what it's worth, no judge ever asked for that more than once.
Here we go. So if we're sure that this is the date we want to calculate to, all we do is click Generate Report, and we end up with an actual schedule of arrears, which is really handy. This is the summary block. This is probably the most important thing. Once you know that all of the payments and all of the amounts due are properly entered, you can see that the total principal that is still due and owing is a little over $34,000. Total interest is $3,348 on that money. And then here's the penalty calculation. Now, again, I'm going to show you here in just a second that the program automatically knows not to go past February 1st with that calculation. This is also important to know. For instance, if the court were to say, I really want you to make this payment within a week, you can go in and change that date that I showed you a minute ago and move it up a week, or you can just take this, multiply it by 7, and you're going to have, and you add that to this number here, and you're going to have the new amount that's due 7 days from now. But if you just change that date by going back to the program and changing that date to a week later, it'll automatically calculate that too. But if we come down here, we can see that this is the child support penalty table. And as it clicks forward in time, this number keeps going up. But then when we hit right here, we see February 1st, it stops at that amount and never increases again. That's because no more penalties are assessed after that date. So that's why that's that way. Okay. You can do not only child support calculations here, any Nevada judgment, because Nevada judgments are all subject to statutory interest. And at the very bottom of the program, you can see all the way from 1960 to the present, you can see what the statutory interest rates were every 6 months. And every 6 months, we modify this. We put in what the current statutory interest rate is, which is the prime rate at Nevada's largest bank plus 2%. And that's where we get, right now we're at 5.25%. And that will change on the 1st of July. So that's going to be the modification. Okay, so that is the penalty and interest calculator. Let me just stop sharing here for a second. And